Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Your Money, Your Life podcast, episode 238 of the podcast. We do this every week, so make sure you like, subscribe, five-star rate, and review the pod wherever you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, do the same thing. Folks, I got shades for the first time. My wife told me they look good. The guy at the store told me they look good, and I tend to believe him, right? I have to believe him. He wouldn't lie to me about these shades, right? Let me know. I was never a shades guy. Got them. So when I'm walking around, I'm using them now. Let me know if you think they look good. The guy at the store told me they look great. It was 250 bucks. I'm assuming that he wouldn't lie to me about that. But if you're watching the YouTube, let me know what you think about the shades. Before we get into this episode, we have a lot to cover. We have a lot to cover. First and foremost, taking a look at the markets and what is happening when it comes to interest rates, inflation, and the like. So let's jump right into it with the market update of the week. If you look at the chart over the past 5 days, we've actually seen a strong and decently strong market return over 2% on the S&P, the S&P 500 tracker. On a monthly basis, up over 1%. And again, year to date, inching towards 19% at 18.74 so far, a return year to date since the beginning of the year. What's driving the market right now? One, there was new data that came out about payrolls. So, payroll data, I want to get to the payroll data if we have that. Payroll data was interesting. They were overestimated for the year up to March. So, the US payrolls marked down by most since 2009 in preliminary data. So, early revision showed that almost 818,000 fewer jobs in the year through March. So in the year through March, there was actually 818,000 less jobs than were initially reported. Um, but it still says the pace of job growth is still healthy, but moderation has began sooner than expected. So that's huge news. If you're telling me that there was a lot less jobs than were initially reported, what did that do to psyche? What does that mean? What does that mean to investors is a big thing here. So big news there was if you look at the level of revisions, and this happens, they initially put out numbers and then they revise these numbers, but this is one of the biggest revisions that we've seen. And you have to wonder why that is. Why was it revised so much? What happened that the data was so off and it was revised the most it's been revised since 2009. So that's big news in the markets. But so far, I think the market is still anticipating, and the Fed minutes came out yesterday. If you're listening to this on Thursday as we when release, the Fed minutes did come out, and the Federal Reserve again is the Federal Reserve Bank that sets a lot of policies and frameworks to help moderate price and as well as to keep people employed, and they use some tools to do so. And with that said, they came out in their meeting minutes and said that they expect to cut rates by some sort of percentage point in September, meaning next month. So the rate cutting is beginning. The market seems to have been anticipating it and pricing that in already. And so we've seen again a rebound from August or late July's turn correction. We've seen a rebound. September is usually not a great time for the market, so that's one thing to note. Um, but we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. So that's the big update on the market. You've seen Peloton. I've been bearish on Peloton, the customer service practice that they have actually, and I love the product obviously, and I use the bike pretty much every day, almost every day. But they just came to the market with their earnings, and they said that their sales growth has returned, but they're still below expectations. They still are looking for ways to make this turnaround stick. Right, they have to make a turnaround stick because it's a company that's been hurting. They've been trying to cut expenses. They've been trying to grow sales, and it's been tough. They did narrow their losses, which was 8 cents per share versus 17 cents per share expected. So that's just a lot of cost cutting and people leaving the biz. You're seeing like different, even instructors going different ways and then probably not getting offered as much and all these different things that are happening with Peloton. But the investors still aren't very bullish on the company, but we'll see how it turns out. I mean, again, I've not been as it's not one that I follow closely, but I've been pretty adamant in my bearish tone sentiment for Peloton. They're planning to invest more in hardware and software to deliver a better experience. We'll see if all that pans into more users and adoption of the bike. But so far, their turnaround efforts aren't met with a lot of enthusiasm in the market. So that's just one area of a company, and we've also seen just a general market. But if September's going to be big, it's already kind of getting priced in. So as long as the Fed is showing their hand that they're more than likely going to cut rates by a small percentage, by half, probably quarter of a basis point. Um, that's what the market's anticipating. There shouldn't be any changes. There shouldn't be craziness off of that. It's just now almost a foregone conclusion. So let's move on to more news, and we'll look at a bid. So there's a bid for Paramount and see exactly what that means. So there's a long battle for Paramount. It continues. There's a later arriving bidder, Edgar Rothman, who has reportedly bid control for the historic Hollywood studio for $6 billion. The Wall Street Journal is citing this. The former music exec and Seagram heir first submitted a 4.3 billion bid earlier this week, but um, he upped the bid apparently. So Roku and Netflix Access Industries are among the financing sources listed in a letter Brofman sent with a new bid, according to the Journal. So again, they're trying to buy Paramount, huge Hollywood studio. And it's interesting to see where the hands are going to change. If it's going to change hands, he's upped his bid to 6 billion for Paramount, and so I think that's interesting. It's always interesting to see M&A going on and why people are making these moves. Because if you're making a large purchase with 6 billion behind it, a capital, you have to have pretty high conviction and pretty high conviction in what you can do, what the asset is, and how you can make this work for yourself down the line. So always interesting to see that. So we'll keep an eye on that. We talked about the payroll story, overestimated by 30%. The US likely added 30% fewer jobs than previously estimated in the year through March. This is the biggest downward revision since the financial crisis. The reduction in the number of new jobs by 818,000 indicates the labor market has been cooling for longer than thought. It also probably reflects adjustments for the creation and closure of businesses and how immigration workers are counted, analysts said. Final figures aren't due until early next year, but the report is apt to cooler coming interest rate decisions by the Federal Reserve and Chair Powell, his remarks tomorrow in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So that's a big note. Like if people were saying that the job market was tough, and the numbers didn't really reflect that. If you saw us talking on this, if you've been listening to us, who say, "Hey, consumer is holding up well. We still have decently low employment, even though inflation's kicking has been kicking butt for years, kicking people's butt for years. Wages have increased, different things happen, all that, and unemployment's still below 5%." But now with this new payroll revised number, it is showing that, because people were saying there was sentiments online that it's harder to get a job. It's a tough job market. New job hires are saying it's a tough job market. And one of the biggest revisions was in business and professional services, which I think was revised down 150,000 or 350,000 in jobs. So that makes a lot more sense. If people are saying, the sentiment is actually bad out there, but the numbers don't always reflect that. Now we're seeing potentially why with this gap that has just now been revised. So that makes a lot of sense, and it's a big interesting news. Speaking of news, the definition of wealth is up by 300,000. So what does it take to be wealthy? That's a question you have to ask yourself. About 300,000 more than last year, according to a Charles Schwab annual modern wealth survey. While Americans in 2023 settled on a net worth of 2.2 million to feel wealthy, is the dividing line between rich and the rest. That figure has rose to 2.5 in this year's survey, a 14% jump that reflects increases in home and stock prices. And that's what Bloomberg says. So on the other hand, while last year's survey's taker said it took an average net worth of 1 million to feel financially comfortable, that has now dropped to 778,000. But 2.5 million isn't rich in the eyes of baby boomers or Gen Xers, who set the threshold at 2.8 million and 2.7 respectively. So if you break it down by cities, in San Francisco, wealth requires a whopping 4.4 million. In New York, it's 2.9, Washington, D.C., Denver, and Seattle, 2.8. So the modern wealth survey kind of broke down what was wealth or feeling wealth for the people that took the survey. It was 1,000 adults complete the survey. It was nationally representative of the U.S. population. Adults had to be 21 to 75 years old to qualify. Um, And it says, okay, this is interesting. Americans feel that they're in better shape to reach their financial goals than generations that came before them. 64% more or as likely, 36% less likely. We're deep diving more into the survey. Having more ways to build wealth, the accessibility and diversity of investment options contribute most to increased confidence. Reasons why more likely to reach financial goals in older generation. Okay. Almost half of Americans feel they're living a better lifestyle than their parents at the same age and are better at investing their money. So, okay, that's a good, interesting take. 3 in 5 Americans are investing today, with younger generations beginning to invest earlier. That's a good thing. I think a lot of that was pulled forward by the pandemic and everyone pretty much being online. Americans are highly confident in their investing strategies with their similar levels of confidence across generations. Increased availability for financial advice and access to research are top reasons for Americans' high confidence in investing. Okay. This survey was pretty interesting. And it broke down again what the main crux of it was. What does it feel to be wealthy? And it broke down by cities. It broke it down by the average of the course the respondents to this survey. And the no numbers now 2.5 million net worth to feel wealthy. Um, yeah, and so I think that's really, really quite interesting. And what is that number for you? What is the number for you? It could be different based on your cost of living, based on the things you do, based on what you're trying to accomplish. But you definitely should keep an eye on it and know that number for yourself, and write it down. Write it down is always a good way to do that as well. Anything else that we missed? Target hits on earnings bullseye as folks start reaching for nice to have products. So Target popped a little bit, popped 11% yesterday. They beat on their expectations. They had sales rising 3% from a year earlier. It was definitely an improvement from their first quarter where sales dipped 3%. Discretionary area. Americans may be shifting back to the don't need but want it ethos, and that's obviously a lot of what Target has as a retailer. Is some of your stuff that you definitely need, and but they also have some discretionary items that people pick up, electronics, different things of that nature. Consumers are starting to spend more. They saw nice to have products like bathing suits, candles. Walmart also unloaded strong sales growth as merch sales, think air fryers and sports gear rose for the first time in 11 quarters. So it seems like people are branching back out to spending. Maybe it's the summertime. Maybe they're preparing for holidays. Who knows? Maybe it's back to school. It's got to be part of back to school. But that's something to keep your eye on if the consumer is showing something different. Um, Other quick hits, Beyonce now has a whiskey line. I'm not a big whiskey drinker, or any of you out there, but she's now has a whiskey line. Let me know how it is. If you tasted it, Sir Davis is what it's called. Let me know. Um, Call Her Daddy host signs $100 million with Sirius XM. Another big bag for them winning. Wow, that's another big bag on their end. Anything else in the quick hits or news that we need to talk about? We did talk about the Starbucks CEO's salary last week, but they are saying now he's got the greatest job ever. I think it's 100 million in compensation. I think he gets a commute from home as a top exec. He still gets to work from his Newport Beach, California home. He's going to take the private jet when he needs to go to headquarters. Great job. I mean, again, if you're doing great things, you're going to be rewarded in kind. So that's what happens there. McDonald's is still America's #1 fast food. So this is a survey that was done with 2 fast food chains. That's okay. That's interesting. McDonald's still America's #1 fast food. Total U.S. stores, average revenue per restaurant units. Interesting. Okay, well, let's move away from current news and let's talk about the questions of the week. There was a few of them, a few good ones that I liked and I want to touch on, and we will get into them now. The first one being, what percent of purchases are returned for online and brick and mortar purchases? So, what percent of purchases are returned for online? That'll be your online. So, we'll break it down by online first and brick and mortar retail store purchases. For online, I would assume it's a lot, it's a less. And so, I would go anywhere between 10 and 15% online. Oh, no, no, wait. Okay. So, online, I was thinking that the annoyance of returning it would be worse. But again, I have to factor in brick and mortar. You go in and try it on first. So there's probably less returns there, right? So we're gonna go flip that. We're gonna go brick and mortar is less returns, bigger hassle. I would assume online they've actually made it really, really easy to return stuff now with the things that they implemented. My wife would know about all this stuff, but let's double back on that. I would go brick and mortar, 10 to 50%, online, 15 to 20%. Let's see. Overall returns is 14. Oh, I was right. Online returns 17.6. Brick and mortar, 10%. I was look at the deduction, the analysis, thinking on the fly, problem solving. That would be a great interview question for those that want to see how people think. Online return 17.6, brick and mortar 10%, right down the pipeline, folks. We're thinking sharp this morning on Your Money Your Life podcast. Let's dive into the next one. What is the average restaurant tip for full service and quick service meals? Average restaurant tip for full service and quick service meals. Okay, so we have two, full service and then quick service. Full service obviously will be higher, quick service less. I don't even know. Do you do tip for quick service? I think quick service would be between 5 to 10%, full service between 15 and 20. Um, oh, I was close again. Full service 19, quick service 16. Okay, okay. So we're really getting really knocking it out. Let's see if we can do one more and knock this out of the park. Oh, I think that might be all of it for us today. That might be all the questions. That might be all the questions we have for today. Folks, thank you for joining as always. We appreciate it. Make sure whenever you're listening, you like, subscribe, 5-star rate, review. Also, follow the podcast and make sure that you're tuning in and share this with friends. We had someone that had been listening for years, just got reconnected, joined the New Street community, and that's like what we'd like to see. So we'll talk to you guys next week.